the chairman's brief, but I've now got the latest one up in front of me, and I just want to make sure I can see you all. So if you're waving at me, I can see you. Okay, fantastic. Excellent. All right. Well, the chairman is finally ready, so let's begin. So welcome to the third DGNS, Digital Governance and Safety Committee of 2022. In the interest of time, I'm going to go straight into the business of the meeting, and then when you're called on to present, or if you have a question or a comment, your first time, if you'll introduce yourself then, that would be great. For the benefit of those who may be hearing the recording of the session, there will be a private session at the end of the public one, and then we will take forward and report on the private session at the next public session of the committee. And the committee papers and minutes have been uploaded to the DHCW website. And then I am going to aim for a comfort break at 2 o'clock. It's a really busy agenda, so we will try and go through the issues at some pace. If you do need a comfort break a little earlier, just let me know, and I'm sure we can be flexible on that. And I'm going to take this opportunity to welcome David. David, good to have you back. David Murphy from Audit Wales is attending the session. He's observing both the public and the private meeting today.
Thank you.
Oh, a pleasure to have you, David. Always good to make sure that you're looking for opportunities that we can improve how we're approaching this. And I believe that Mark Cox is also going to be joining us to give us an update on Matters 3.1, which we will take on below. So moving swiftly on, apologies for absence have been received from Paul Evans, Interim Head of Quality and Regulatory, and Michelle Sell. And I believe that they are going to be ably represented by Keith Reeves, who's our Service Management Team Manager, and David Sheard. And I don't think there are any other apologies that I need to be aware of at this time. And have I got everyone? I think so. So with that, any declarations of interest relating to the business of the meeting that I need to be aware of? I can see shaking heads, so that's great. And are there any matters that we need to add on or consider in the public session today that we need to be aware of? Nope, nobody raising their hands or letting me know. So with that, I can move through the consent agenda. So you've all had access to the consent agenda. I haven't received any comments or questions in advance of the meeting. Is there anything that anyone needs to raise now? Fair warning, I can't see any movement other than general signs of life. So with that, can we accept that all matters on the consent agenda have been accepted? So that's great. So that relates to the minutes of the last meeting. Both the public and the abridged ones have been accepted as approved. Chris Darling has shared the forward work plan for noting, and that's all been noted. And the Quality and Engagement Act update has been circulated. And again, Chris, that's for noting. Okay. So, Chris, can I start with the action log? I think you are actually going to make some comments of that and ask Mark as well to be ready to provide an update on DPIF. So 3.1 in the main agenda, please.
Yeah, no problem, Rowan. So there's a couple of things on the action log. The first action, 2002101504. Darren Lloyd wasn't at the last meeting, so there was the request was to get a further update on that action. Darren has updated it, as committee members will see from the action log. So it's if there's any further comments or queries related to social care data. So if there's any comments, I'm sure Darren's happy to take them now, but he's provided the update in the papers. So I'll just pause to see if you're happy with that. The second action.
Can I just ask Darren he's got his hand up.
Just to add, Chair, that part of the context of some of the explanation on the action is actually in the main IG report under 3.2.1 around Wales, a code for sharing personal information. So there's a connection with the paper as well. It's actually in the meeting as part of the substantive meeting today. So
we'll take any discussion then. There's a lot going on in IG at the moment, so that we'll cover that then. Chris? Chris, you're on mute.
Apologies, Chair. I was bound to do it at some point. The second action related to that one, just making sure we had a documented follow-up. So that's been done. So ask the committee if that one could be closed today. The data promise update, it was put on to make sure that was updated on at this meeting today. I think, again, I'll turn to Darren, but I think that'll be covered in Darren's update and the risk register. If Darren, yeah. Darren's confirmed that. And then the final one related to the incident review and learning group and how we ensure that learning and themes come through that report. Now, I know Keith and Michelle have been working, refining that report on an ongoing basis. So again, I don't know if Keith wants to comment now on any changes that have been made or any changes that the group are looking to make.
So the main change, the main change is within the report that we are now starting to incorporate some of the common themes and the work plan that we're approaching for a lot of the recommendations that are coming through. So there's 3 areas in that, and I'll cover those off if that's okay, Chair, in the report.
Thanks, Keith. So those are the actions, Chair. So I'm hoping those can be closed following today's meeting. The final one that you asked for an update on at the last meeting was an update on the DPIF funding position. I can see Mark has joined, and I know Ivan's probably got the latest position as well. So I turn to Mark, and Ivan might want to add to this. Mark.
Thanks, Chris, and thank you, Chair. Just to give you a brief update, I guess, on where we are with the DPIF funding position. You'll be aware that we've requested some £33.2 million worth of revenue and £6.7 million worth of capital to flow through DHCW for this financial year. At present, 50% of capital, that's 3.4 million, and 34% of revenue, some 11.4 million, still remains outstanding in terms of funding letters. We have been in contact with our digital leads at Welsh Government, and we are confident of receiving these funding letters in the next few weeks. They do have to go through the administrative process of getting the final ministerial approval, and that'll enable the DPIF team in Welsh Government to translate those into formal funding letters. Happy to go through the individual schemes if that's deemed appropriate, but I guess I'll leave Ivan to see if he's got anything additional he'd like to offer up.
And just Ivan, before you, I think to say that we did cover this at the recent board meeting in some depth. So Ivan, welcome sort of some comments in that context. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you very much, Chair. Well, only to say that there is very close communication with the Welsh Government team. That there's been, I guess, from all perspectives, a somewhat regrettable moving about in some aspects of the DPIF funding going back over the last 3 to 4 months, and that's taking its time to work through the Welsh Government processes, and also has required some resetting of, or some adjustment, I guess, of milestones and targets that need to go through the relevant programme governance. There is still a high level of trust between, and confidence. We're operating technically, I suppose we're going at risk, aren't we, Mark? But in practice, there's a high level of confidence because we're speaking almost daily with the Welsh Government team, and the paperwork needs to catch up. That said, though, it is still a risk to us, given how fragile the financial position is across the whole of the NHS in Wales. So we are trying to bolt down those letters as soon as we possibly can. I think that they're days, a week or two away. That is, we know that we're on the same page as them in Welsh Government, and we should expect that, as we then go through the year, once all those letters are in place, there'll be the opportunity to do the change requests in the way there usually is, as we need to adjust through the year. But yeah, so it is technically an uncertain situation, but I think we've got a reasonable confidence that that it will all come together. Although it does not help us with our financial planning uncertainty, obviously.
Yeah.
Definitely, even, and I'd be supportive of that. It has crystallised significantly over the recent weeks, and we have established what I consider more formal and better comms, particularly from the finance perspective, within the team. Now that's been strengthened at Welsh Government end as well, so it is getting a lot better.
Okay, so I can see David has his hand up, and I've probably got some questions as well. So David, do you want to lead off?
Yes, thanks, Rowan. David Salway, independent board member. Thanks for the update, Mark and Even. Pleased to see that we've got a high level of confidence in the letters arriving in the next couple of weeks, which is great, and it mitigates one of the new risks we've added. My question really is, it's taken a few months to get to this position. Has that delay in getting the funding letters prevented some work streams being kicked off or some orders being placed with the supply chain? And if there is an impact, is that containable within the rest of the year in terms of what we're trying to achieve in our annual plan?
Well, David, I'll go first. Mark might want to follow. I would say from a DSGW perspective, no, because we've been content to go at risk based on the very close relationship that we have with the finance team, because we're dealing with many different projects and programs that are funded through different letters. However, health boards have taken a more cautious risk appetite approach, using our language.
Yeah.
And health boards on certain programs and projects have not been willing to start work until the letters are confirmed, and in some cases those letters are still not confirmed, and therefore the health boards have not confirmed people into posts, and that is causing delays. And some of the impact of those delays rolls back onto us, because these are they're collaborative projects between us and health boards. But of course, they're sovereign organisations, so it's their choice as to whether they're willing to go at risk in the way that we have or not.
Okay, and the delay in confirming some of those posts in the health board, is that situation recoverable, do you think, or have we got a problem that's going to result in us maybe not spending as much of the funding this year as planned, and some of it going unspent?
Well, so difficult to answer. Health boards are organisations of 16,000 people, so yes, it's recoverable, because they've got a very large labour pool, so they will be able to move people across onto these if they were to identify them as priorities, and on the assumption that they've got that capability within their wider workforce. But it would have to come at the expense of something else, and that is a choice that they will have to make. Pretty soon, though, it won't be recoverable, because as we get into the second half of the year, for example, if you move somebody from another project or program into this, there's inevitably a bit of an onboarding, getting up to speed sort of period. So I don't think it's yet non-recoverable, but it's still down to health board's discretion as to whether they want to prioritise these digital projects over other things, because they're thinly stretched across their whole workforce, even though they've got many thousands of people working for them.
Okay, thanks, Ian. That's helpful.
So I think my question really builds upon sort of the current state to the risk, is one that we've chosen to accept and go at risk. Has there been any discussion of what time frame that we are willing to continue to go at risk, because if I put my old entrepreneur's hat on, you always want that funding to come in, and but there are, it's a difficult funding climate for government at the moment, and they can't do everything they want to do, and it might be that for whatever reason that money doesn't show up. So do we have any timeline in place where we would review our go at risk position? Has that been discussed?
Well, I'm happy to lead on this. Mark might want to come in from a technical financial perspective, but based on our discussions at exec team last week, we had our JET meeting where we've been very open and transparent with Welsh Government, not just through the finance conversation, but the full executive and wider accountability conversation about our position and about the reliance that we're placing on email correspondence that we've had and our sight of the overall Digital Priorities Investment Fund portfolio allocations. So I don't think at the moment that, in the circumstance of the absence of a letter arriving within the next 4 weeks, that we bring things to a dead stop, because we know that the allocation is in the DPIF, and we're not. I think it would be very unlikely that the DPIF overall amount of 50 million revenue would be reduced in this year. Where the risk hits us is that ordinarily at this stage in the year, if we had the funding letters, we could be having sensible conversations about maybe accelerating or maybe reprioritizing and veering from one program to another in order to get as much value and delivery as we could. We're not doing that because we're very, very focused on just getting locked down on the documented trail that we need to give us the full assurance.
And I think the other bit that sort of stood out for me on the board presentation, there are certain programs that aren't covered, and I'm thinking of the Canisc replacement, which is I think in the portfolio plan for Q4. Are we concerned? Do we have any concerns about being able to resource, undertake any development to be ready to still hit that particular program? And I raise that one in particular because it is our highest risk, or it's the old system, it's the highest risk that we have. Rydian, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. As lead for Digital Healthcare Wales and the organisational representation within the Cancer Informatics board, the funding is assured to the go live date of phase 1. Beyond phase 1, we're in continued discussions about what that funding model looks like, both from the centre and then from the service users who consume the software.
Thank you, Rydian. That's really good to hear. So that's I think we're all doing what we can. I think so that's good to hear. It is a moving issue, and I know that there's an additional risk that's now on the corporate register that's being managed at the executive level. So I think it's appropriate, but it's obviously one that everyone is alive to and continuing a watching brief. I think that's all we can do for now.
Yeah, and I think there's a bit about the assurance that the necessary links and the necessary transparency is being laid out to stakeholders, not only within DPIF and Welsh Government, but also within the finance profession within Welsh Government, because obviously they're keen to have an understanding regarding our financial forecast and our anticipated income, and to make sure that everybody's signed up to that. So they go through their own individual checks and balances from the financial perspective at Welsh Government to say that our anticipated funding is aligned to the DPIF department's anticipated funding allocations as well, to make sure that that's aligned.
Okay, and I suppose the other risks now live outside of the organisation. So if for any reason that DPIF bucket of cash was reallocated, then we're in a very different situation. But I don't think we can plan on ifs and buts at the moment. We just have to plan on the basis of the information that we have. So. Okay, thank you, Mark. That's been really useful. Thank you, Ivan and Rydian, for your response and your transparency. So thank you for that. So thank you for the update, and Chris noted where we are on the action log. So if I can move on to Keith to cover the incident review and organisational learning. Keith, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the paper has been circulated previously. I won't go into. I mean, I'll just go into sort of some of the key changes that have happened since previous reports. So first of all, we've now started to incorporate a quarterly comparison around the number of reviews that have been undertaken. So for Q1 compared to Q1 last year, there has been a reduction in the number of reviews, but this has also been based on the reduction in the number of incidents that require review. What this has done, though, is because within the teams that undertake these reviews, it's given us an opportunity to look at improving the quality of them to then identify additional learning, and also to combine the impact. So in the event of a technical incident, there may be an impact on clinical services. So what we're starting to see is that link between the two, and reducing the number of reports down to 1, but still capturing that impact. The second major change is around the common themes from review. So this goes back to the statement I made about the last action. So what we're building this up, and so this section will actually start to include some of the work that we're taking to manage the themes that we've identified. So the main one that I'm personally working on is around major IT incident management. So this is about the improvements that we can make around the process and how DHCW as an organisation responds. So there's a working group that's been established. Although we meet on a monthly basis to go through progress, we're working behind the scenes then to bring in additional templates or additional changes to the process, as well as development of additional training, so that anybody that's on the management rota will have the same level of training throughout the organisation. This is so the response will be the same, and through that we should then be able to identify further improvements that we can make along the way. The second theme that we're also then looking at is change management. So looking at some of the previous major incidents, we noticed a common theme around change management processes not necessarily being followed as robustly as we previously have done. So that's resulted in an incident review being undertaken, but also an audit of the change management process and the approach to how the organisation undertakes change. The reports for those will be coming to the August IRLG meeting, and so any recommendations that are coming out will be seen as a positive. And then the final one is an ongoing working group that's looking at workforce behaviours. So we've had a few meetings around this to look at the culture within the organisation, and also to look at the results coming out of things like staff surveys, exit interviews, and also some internal investigations that have also been undertaken, which should then lead to improvements within the organisation. So I think for now that's all I want to cover off. I think it may be obviously with further discussion, it would probably be good for this committee to see some of the outputs that come from those the working group work. So we would look at both quality and quantity measures on how we can present that.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Have I got any comments? I think this is important, Keith, and I'm pleased to see that you've identified some common themes that can help improve how we're going along. I think the cultural aspects are quite illuminating. These processes have to work with real life, but they also have to safeguard what we're doing. So finding that path is challenging. So I think with that comment, receive that report, and thank you for it. And I look forward to seeing some outputs from the working groups, perhaps at a subsequent meeting. Chris, can we make a note to put that on the agenda, please? Thank you, Keith.
Yeah.
Okay. Assurance reports. So Darren, can I ask you to lead off with our IG assurance report, please?
Certainly, thank you, Chair. The report covers the activity from the 19th of April to July 22nd. Some relative highlights in the report, because some of the items are substantive, as you know, in terms of performance around some of our Freedom of Information Act requests, those type of things. But some areas of note. There is another separate paper on the agenda around just some work that we did around some communication described as your privacy, your rights, so they later on, and the members have had the opportunity just to have a look at those. There's a little bit of information about the Wales Code for Sharing Personal Information. So this is what I alluded to in the previous discussion around the actions. Some work that the Wales Code for Sharing Personal Information has been around for some considerable time now, actually, and is part of that sort of supporting the agenda for information sharing, not just across health and social care, but across many other public services and those that are delivering services to Welsh citizens. So we've gone through I suppose, an evolution of that kind of information sharing framework as we describe. So the paper describes some of that, and we are doing some work around how we move on from that to further instill the kind of the cultural aspect of important information sharing across public services around some of the work that we're doing in the Information Commissioner's Office around making the likes of the WASPI a code of conduct effectively, which is reinforcing the need for a framework within organisations and doing some measurement with them in order to ensure that they have a adequate and, I suppose, appropriate sharing methodology, and that the Welsh resident, the Welsh citizens at the heart of the requirement, I suppose. But from a public service perspective, so we're reaching out beyond, I suppose, the health and social care remit into other public services, and that's previously been sponsored by Welsh Government and is supported by Welsh Government as well. So it's very much a kind of a team approach on this one, but it's a framework that has stood us in good stead for quite a number of years, I would suggest, and where we've now got opportunities to move it forward even further on, because it served us well through the pandemic response, to be perfectly honest, and a couple of the board and committee members today will be aware of that through the discussions that we had with 22 local authorities, 7 health boards, 3 trusts and other special authorities as well. Local authorities were part of the TTP response. So WASPI is quite an important part of our armoury around that kind of information governance and information sharing agenda. So there's a bit in the paper on that one. Relevant elements again about what our activity looks like around data protection impact assessments. So there's some important work being done there, and I suppose the factory line of those data protection impact assessments is continual and it will be ongoing as part of a part requirement of the law and our requirements as, of course, a provider of essential programs and projects around IT and other information services. In terms of the statistics, there was another action because of our sharing, our measurement against what we describe as information governance toolkit. There was a need to put some target dates on this, so that was another action that we needed to fulfill. And I know Cora Suckley represented us, myself and Ridian at the last meeting. So that you will see that in this report there are some target dates for completing certain actions that were identified as a result of us going through the information governance toolkit. The other elements, just an area for note, is the IG incidents and complaints element. The subtype in the reporting has changed because of our moving to a new All Wales Datic system. I would suggest it's still not really reflective of the role and function of DHCW because they're very centric to obviously other healthcare providers. So some of those subtype reporting elements are probably we need to get into the detail potentially in terms of the incidents to understand what they actually are, which there are predominantly low-level aspects that we're considering, and some of them from other third parties that we've kind of inherited as part of a relationship. But to give the committee some assurance, they are low-level incidents that we've recorded as part of our obligation as an organisation, as a statutory obligation. And I think that's probably as much as I want to say on that. Just to pick up on the data promise action. Just to fulfil that action. There's a requirement in order to come back to the committee with a plan. The plan is currently in with Welsh Government. We've been assured, and I have briefed our Chief Exec, Helen Thomas, because obviously there's a lot of interest around the data promise work that's going on in Welsh Government, that there will be a plan with some dates over the forthcoming weeks. John Sweeney, who was seconded into Welsh Government, has been helping quite significantly now in terms of looking at elements of what was previously discussed and taken forward to some other individuals within Welsh Government, and kind of putting a little bit more meat on the bones, let's just say, and putting some dates and some more tangible elements to that plan in terms of what the requirement is of the data promise, how that's situated, and who is responsible under certain circumstances. So that's taken a little bit of time to put together. So I'm expecting the first draft of that over the next couple of weeks, and would hope to provide that to the committee at the next meeting. If not before, at least for the committee to have some observation and sight of that in due course.
Any comments from the rest of David?
Thanks, Chair. Darren, thanks for the update. It's really helpful. In terms of the data promise, good to hear that there's some progress being made and that a plan will surface in the near future. From a DHCW perspective, is that preventing us from doing anything that's adding value around any of our programs at the moment? Or are we in a period where, as long as it's sorted within the near future, we're okay?
Very good question, David. I think that the data promise itself is its roots are in some of the strategies, the Welsh Government strategies, Healthier Wales, those type of areas, in terms of ensuring that the public are fully informed about how information held about them is used. So it doesn't prevent us from moving forward as an organisation, but what it does, it kind of allows us to demonstrate that we are an organisation with robust governance arrangements and robust information governance arrangements in place. So it's a parallel conversation that is having, and it does actually help to provide confidence, let's just say, to our citizens that we are doing it correctly and within specific lawful purposes and all of those type of things. So it isn't an impediment in terms of the timescales, but we are heavily invested in what it says and how it actually responds and what it actually is asking organisations to promise and subscribe to in some respects. So it's a bit of a yes and a bit of a no, I suppose. So apologies for that.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that the delay in getting this agreed, and it's important that it's done properly, isn't impacting our ability to add value through the data we've already got, and that that there's something that we could be doing that we can't because of the fact it hasn't been agreed yet. So
it strengthens our position. It certainly strengthens our position as the as a central expert organisation with expertise and responsibility for significant amounts of patient and client information across Wales. So,
okay, thank you, Darren.
So Darren, one question from me is there any aspect of, there's been a lot of activity in England, but also from the Westminster government around policy and legislation. how does that overlap or come alongside some of the work that you're doing, and do you anticipate that that is going to cause confusion or create any extension in the plans that you're currently trying to take forward?
Another really good question, Chair. As you're probably aware,
We've got sweets today, David. Both of us. We get rewards.
Yeah, as you're probably aware, there's a new bill in kind of in the discussion and going through the motions around looking at data protection, privacy and confidentiality, taking apart a little bit the general data protection regulations, and the role of the Information Commissioner's Office and some of those other functions and services that are kind of been inherited as part of the general data protection regulations. I'm assured from Welsh Government colleagues that they are there and part of that sort of that consultation process, and to ensure that Wales is kept appraised of those and is aware of any implications. I think whole scale, doing some of the analysis myself, they aren't sweeping changes within and changing into the law, so I don't think we have a huge amount to worry about. There are some changes, I think, mainly around the Commissioner's role in terms of their role around their ability to support organisations through their kind of compliance, and there is some kind of resetting, I suppose, of confirming the responsibilities of the likes of myself, like a data protection officer, those type of functions, but still having them in place. I don't think there's necessarily a stripping away of the controls and the regulations as they stand at the moment, or putting them more into a UK type of frame, I would suggest. But I know Welsh Government are through discussions with colleagues are kind of on the ball with that one and having regular discussions back and forth across border.
Fantastic. And then there was a question at our AGM, admirably fielded by Ridian, which was to do with the assurance of patients' privacy and consent. And since we're being recorded, could you perhaps just let people know where they could get hold of the Your Privacy, Your Rights materials that have been published?
All of those have been distributed to the points of care, I suppose. So all of the health boards, all of the trusts, primary care have all had communications as a result of that. We are just putting together another communication, so it's available within our own sort of spheres as well. But we made sure that all of those points of care organisations had that information first, so that if that invariably, of course, how that comes in, it will be those that needed to really make sure that they revoked the old copies of that information and put the new copies in to make sure that it was appropriate. So yes, there are multiple ways that individuals can get their hands on that data and that information.
Thank you. And is there a copy online? If
Yes.
people are online minded. Okay.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you, Darren. I think we can move on. Ridian, Informatics Assurance Report. Thank you.
Document 3.322.
Yes.
Yeah. Paul isn't here.
It was on leave, I believe.
Oh, okay. Well, it's a long document with a very long list of acronyms. So if you can remember those, I'll test you later. Regarding point 3 within the paper, you'll see that in progress or completed, there's a rating, RAG rating there. You'll see that the majority are green or yellow, there are no red, and there are assurance quality plans within the reporting period underneath that. There is some detail further down in the document about some of these things, including the acute coronary syndrome pathway, to name but one, going through pages 6 to 7, and down you'll notice work regarding single sign-on, and then a table regarding safe case and readiness reports. Canisker being one of the things that we touched upon earlier. The recommendation is obviously for the committee to note this. I'm happy to take questions if required, and I thank the team for preparing the patient. I got two heads on today, I can tell you. The paper. Thank you very much. Sorry, juggling a few clinical issues as well today.
Thank you, Ridian, and appreciate that you're patient facing, and that's yeah, nothing more important. So thank you for that. And we all had sight of the report in plenty of time, and I noted, Ridian, that it was all in specification. Did anyone have any comments? In which case, we'll mark that for assurance, and thank you, Ridian, for that. If I can ask Rachel to step up, Rachel Powell, to provide the Information Services Assurance report, please.
Thank you, Rowan. Yep, so I'm Rachel Powell. Afternoon, everyone. I'm Associate Director for Information, Intelligence and Research. And I just wanted to give a brief update in terms of the current position regarding some of the key priorities being progressed in relation to internal assurance processes for key areas linked to information services. So information services are currently working on the development of an internal system to coordinate many of the current management processes into a single space, including the administration of new service data and information requests. The system will help to ensure that all work requests are managed appropriately and all information to support wider performance reporting is consistent and available as required. And it'll also help us to manage work streams that are resourced appropriately. In addition to that system then, we're also introducing and working with NDR, National Data Resource Partners, to set up a new operational group where we'll jointly review new work and ensure that there's an agreed approach undertaken for more robust assurance and to ensure alignment with NDR as well as that's progressing. Since the beginning of May, the ISD Assurance, so the Information Services Department Assurance Group, we've reviewed 14 assurance quality plans and 7 safety case and readiness reports for new developments to consider the impact on information services. 8 projects have attended the ISD Assurance Group to present to the group prompt and timely engagement with our teams, and a further 5 projects were scheduled to present to the group towards the latter half of July after this report was published. We're continuing work on the implementation of service management principles, which I've previously reported to the committee across ISD services, and the service model for the data warehouse and data acquisition was approved by the Operational Services Board in June. We've done some further work on the ISD data flows register, and we've also undertaken a significant amount of training, specialist training for our staff in the last quarter, and that's been captured in our training plan and identified through annual appraisal. And we hope that that provides the committee with further assurance on our key responsibilities around the acquisition, management, reporting and sharing of data. There's no new corporate risks that have been added to the risk register, although I did just want to flag an internal audit review which has been undertaken currently on the switching service, which has previously had a bit of a deep dive to the committee, and we've had some discussion in previous meetings, but the likelihood is we will be looking to de-escalate that risk following completion of that internal audit. And that was essentially the key highlights that I wanted to provide to the committee in relation to the ongoing work to enhance assurance around management and reporting of data, but happy to take any questions.
David.
Thanks, Rowan. Thanks, Rachel, for the update. I'm really pleased to see that we've got a coordination going on with the NDR program to basically look at the incoming work stream. So that's a really good step in the right direction. One of the things that has cropped up previously, I just wanted to check, was from what I can remember, the demand for new services or things that we could do off the back of NDR was quite long, and there needed to be some way of prioritising the demand. So as part of the coordination group that you've established, have we introduced some methodology to understand what's in the hopper, if I can call it that, and how best to prioritise it in terms of the limited resource we've got across your group and the NDR programme?
So it's very operationally focused, so it reports into the NDR reporting structure, and so there's still that key NDR governance structure in place. But I think the intention will definitely be for us to jointly review the work packages coming into NDR and ISD and looking at capacity across both areas, and also ensuring that where, for example, information services are going to take a piece of work forward or are going to progress something, that we're not doing anything at odds with the NDR direction of travel. So it's just ensuring that we've got that joint assurance and review of some of that work so that we can collectively look at it and make sure that we're doing things in the right way. But I think prioritisation as pertinent to us and information services and NDR, and we've both got our own processes and ways of looking at that. It's another opportunity to come together and work out how we can jointly do things a bit more effectively where possible.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rachel.
I don't have any questions, Rachel. It was a very good report. It's very straightforward. Thank you. I can't see anybody else's. So I think we'll note that and ask Chris to bring forward the risk register report for discussion.
Yeah, so I'm just going to run through risk position and those risks allocated to this committee in particular. So at the moment, just for the committee to be aware of, there are 25 risks in total on the corporate risk register, of which 18 are assigned specifically for this committee to provide oversight and scrutiny of. The risk register is presented in full as item 3.4i. You'll note there are 9 risks marked as private, so obviously those will be discussed in detail in the private session of this committee later on today. And just a reminder that those risks assigned to this committee are those relating to information governance, information services, infrastructure, ICT applications development, clinical informatics, cyber and digital delivery programs. The committee over the last 12 months have had the opportunity to deep dive each of the key areas in terms of risks. So we've got to the end of that cycle. I guess that's one point I want to make. We started with information governance. We did information services, and we've done infrastructure, and obviously we do cyber routinely in every committee meeting. So I'm just going to run through the changes in the risk register since the last meeting, and then just pick out some areas of focus. So in terms of new risks, as was reported to the board, there is a new risk 0291 around network equipment delays in relation to data center 2. There's a second new risk around human resource capacity within infrastructure teams to undertake some of the business as usual activities planned for the year. And then the third new risk assigned to this committee is the DPIF funding letters, and I think that was probably updated in full earlier on. So I will pause and see if Gareth or Carwyn want to specifically go into the data center 2 move from an equipment delays perspective, or any other risks relating to that move.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I'll just mention that. So supply demand ever since COVID has been tricky, and we tend to now expect far lengthier delays when we're ordering certainly sort of more rare and specialized equipment. This is no different to the equipment we're using in the new data center. We've mitigated the risk in ordering. So, for example, if the equipment arrives in the next financial year, we will have to take that cost in year rather than this year, which would have significant impact. So we've split the purchase order into several parts as best we can. We have reasonable assurance that a great quantity of that equipment will arrive in year, but there is still a risk, and still a very real risk, that some of that equipment will fall into the next financial year. Those dates from suppliers move regularly. Carwyn's team have a very close relationship with them, and we receive updates every 2 to 3 weeks, and the date changes every 2 to 3 weeks as well. So the best we can do is just keep coming back with the updated date of delivery for that as best we can. Carmen, did you want to add anything to that?
Yes, only a minor thing. The stuff that's on the longer lead time is there are two parts of the network, the production network and the management network. And for the production network, we want it to be as identical as we can get it to our other data center. But for the management network, we're looking to see if we can source sort of, equivalent or equivalent-ish, items that might be on shorter lead time. So we're doing that work with the vendor at the moment. It may be that we've ordered 48 port switches, and it might be that we can get 2 24s for close to the same price. So those are the sorts of things that we're looking at as well to try and bring it in. Certainly from a financial perspective within the current financial year, but also from a kind of project perspective, it would be useful for it to land sooner rather than later, so that we don't need as long an extension or whatever on at the data center.
That's helpful, Cohen. And I can see Ridian has his hand up. So Ridian, can I ask you to ask your question?
Yeah, it's just a general comment, really, Chair, for us to recognise the good work that the teams have done in terms of moving data centres. As a clinician, the lights haven't even flickered. So when you don't notice something that's that important, that's a reflection of the good work that the teams do, both in the planning and operational implementation. So well done, and may it long continue.
Thank you, Rid.
Thank you, Ridian, and very well said. And I also think that we should also record how difficult the situation is right now. So there aren't easy solutions. I have just an example from my wider network. I had a medtech CEO, medical device, who explained to me that his trying to source chips for a medical device that previously were available for £14 were now costing him £87. So it gives you both a sense of how difficult it is and the digital sort of inflation piece that we are managing here. David, could you ask your question?
Yes, thanks, Rowan. So the risk around the network equipment delays, the impact, if it hits, is that we have to extend contracts on current equipment, presumably. I just wanted to understand how big a hit that would be in terms of the contract extension. Are we talking something that's not insignificant that can be managed within the provisions of our budget, or are we talking about something that would have a major impact and variance on our budget that we haven't budgeted for?
Cowen, would you like to answer? You're on mute.
I am on mute. Sorry, yeah. So there's two parts to that, really. We are aligning the installation of the new network with a move from our current data center, the data center 2 as we refer to it. Yeah, and so a delay will potentially mean that we will need to extend data center 2 for a little longer. As well as the equipment itself, you know what I mean, as in, so I suspect from an equipment perspective, broadly speaking, the cost of support on the new equipment, because it's arriving later, that cost of support for that will broadly cancel out the cost of the support extending the current equipment. From a data center perspective, we are working on that with the current supplier. So our contract for the data center ends in June 23. And we are looking at the sort of exit planning at the moment, and putting in provisions around that. In our new, so the main risk with that is probably the energy cost at the moment. So at that data center, we've got fixed power pricing at the moment for the racks that we've got in there, because we negotiated the extension before all of the power rises. So there's a risk that, of course, the energy cost will then start to be reflected in June of next year. So there's a small risk there. That's probably where we are.
Okay, so thanks for that clarification, Colin. I think where I was going was, if we have to extend the contract for the current data center, are we likely to have to extend for a year, in which case the cost
sorry, right, no, we are,
yeah,
sorry, I didn't cover that off. No, we are probably talking 4 months, you know what I mean, as in that sort of length of time, you know what I mean, as in that, yeah, something like that, you know what I mean, as in, so it's not going to be a major cost pressure, you know what I mean, as in it, because we're already paying for the data center. It's only going to be the sort of the extra costs. And just in terms of buying the new replacement capacity, we've come up with an arrangement in our requirements. We've specified that we don't start paying rack rental charges and all the rest of it until we start to migrate equipment in. So before that, we have to install the network, and we've said, look, we will pay the power costs, you know what I mean, as in, because obviously we will have equipment running in the racks, you know what I mean, as in, so it's reasonable and fair for us to pay power charges, but we won't be paying rack rental charges until we start to move stuff in. And as soon as we move stuff in, we'll be switching off services at the other data center.
Oh, that's great. So if I understood you correctly, the costs will, within the budget we've got, we should be able to absorb the cost of the extension, because we haven't started paying for the new stuff. So there may be some
the energy is probably the great unknown at this point in time.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Colin. That's really helpful. Thanks.
Okay.
And Cowan, the energy is the issue because the current data center is less energy efficient than the new one. Is that correct? You're on mute. Sorry.
Again, sorry. Right. So it's because we've got fixed pricing at the moment for the energy in the current data center 2. In terms of once we've moved, after the move, I would expect that our total energy consumption will come down, because it'll be a more efficient data center. That's one of the things that we're asking for, and one of the things that is being scored, you know what I mean, as in is energy efficiency. So the number of kilowatt hours we consume will go down, but the energy price per kilowatt hour at the moment is obviously going up, isn't it? You know, so that's part of the problem. But it's still better than staying where we are and paying higher energy costs, higher rates for energy, and using more energy. So
yeah. So the incremental impact on not the current year, but the second year of our IMTP is that differential between the fact that our current data center just consumes more energy, because in either situation we'll be paying the inflated energy costs because it's not fixed. Excellent. I think we all that makes me feel like Margaret Thatcher talking about the housekeeping budget being like the national economy, which is always a lousy analogy, but I understand the situation. I'm sure that our friends in the finance department are all over that. So thank you, Cowan, and yes, very, very useful update. Generally, Chris, I think going on to the corporate risk register, we have done a deep dive over the last 12 months on all of them. And despite the deep dive and despite the really excellent work that you're all doing, and I want to recognise that, our risk levels haven't really moved very close to their target levels across the board. And I'd really welcome some commentary about, what is the root cause of that. And David, I don't know whether you want to ask a question or I've got a comment to that.
No, I would have made the same point that you've made, Rowan, but I did have a supplementary about one of the things, the infrastructure resource risk, but I'll park that one for a minute.
Let's take that and then do this one first then. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want me to come back on that, comment initially, Rowan, and then come to David. So I think what we've seen over the last 12 months or so is generally not significant changes in the risk scores. What risks have generally happened is they've been mitigated. So they've gone on, and we've had a number of risks that have come to this committee that have been mitigated to the point where they've come off the risk register completely. But the risks that are there in front of you, the majority of them haven't changed. So Canisk is an example where, and I was going to raise actually as part of the update, I doubt Ridian is going to agree to that risk being downgraded until November at the earliest. It's been on the risk register at that score. So I think what we're looking at now is some of the risks that are on there are risks that until you get to a defined place, the data promise you could talk about in the same way until we have clarity from Welsh Government on the plan with that. It's very hard, I think, to change some of the risk scores. And I think where we've had risks that we've had, areas that we can put a plan in place and mitigate, that has happened. I would pick out switching service. I think Rachel alluded to earlier, the internal audit, the outcome of that review, and I know Gareth looked at this in a bit of detail and is keen to look at how we mitigate that downwards. We don't want to jump the gun. We want to make sure we've had that feedback. The reason internal audit are looking at the switching service is because it's been as a corporate risk for the length of time it has. So we want to make sure we get that feedback. I'm happy though, and I think it would be useful to bring to the next committee a bit of analysis of the risks that have come on over the course of the year and where we've had risks that are static, because I think trying to nail down clear action plans with milestones to get to a point where they will be mitigated would be helpful for committee members.
Thank you, Chris. Ridian.
That's a very quick point. The risk relating to Canisk relates to all services that Canisk provides. So although November is an important date for some element of that functionality, the service continues and therefore the risk continues until we decommission the service.
And Ridian, am I correct in expecting that service to continue for a period of time? We haven't got a date agreed yet with the replacement project to see that service discontinue.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Just Rowan, one other quick observation, if I may, on the risk register. So, and it's a follow-on from the one of the risk areas that we did a deep dive on, the infrastructure investment. You'll be aware the risk profile has changed dramatically from a financial pressures perspective. So just in terms of audit trail, that risk in itself was closed following discussions at this committee. There are a number of additional risks that have come on that to an extent have superseded it. Digital inflation, I'd say, being the key one. And just for the committee to be aware, the Audit and Assurance Committee have asked for a deep dive in some of those financial pressures risks at their next committee meeting. So perhaps we can just feed back some of the outcome of that discussion as well.
David? Thank you, Chris.
Yep, thanks, Rowan. So I just wanted a little clarification around the new risk that's been added around infrastructure resource impacting on business as usual. First point I'd like to make, it's good to see that rather than a general catch-all, we've got a resource problem, we're getting a little bit more specific. So that's a welcome development. But I'm just interested to understand what specific resource we were short of and how much of it we're short of, and therefore what's the likely impact.
Gareth, sorry.
Yep, shall I take that? That's okay. It's general resource, David, to answer your question across operations. It says the word infrastructure, but it's not meant specifically as infrastructure in Carwyn's domain, as in infrastructure, as in general hardware. If we take the DC2, the data center 2 migration, for example, if that was to be done solely by internal resource, the team we have doing the work now, if they committed to doing that work themselves, they'd be lifting off all operational activity. They'd be stopping their BAU activity to focus on project. So we're lifting off BAU, business as usual, to take them into project world. And this is generally because of the lack of or the inability to recruit quickly, is that we become very delivery focused. And if we become too delivery focused, we take our foot off the business as usual. And that's got a lot of issues in doing so as well. So the risk here is to say that if we do large complex projects such as a data center move, we have to ensure that we're getting the right funding. It's not just about the hardware and the maintenance, as you so well know. It's about getting that resource in, even through third-party contracts, outside resourcing, whatever it is, to help us do that, so that we're not impacting the internal teams too much. We can absorb some of that, of course, but there's some really big initiatives, not just on Carwyn's side, but on Myrian's side and the application development side, that if we don't get the appropriate funding with that, it has a significant impact to business as usual. And we're already seeing some of that coming through some of the KPI results that we're looking at. And it's really to raise it as a risk that it's not sustainable to do it like this. We have to ensure we can get that appropriate resource with these big projects that we're doing.
Can I
sorry.
just sort of draw that out a little bit, Gareth? So is this to some extent symptomatic of our sustainable funding model that we talk about generally? So, we've raised the DPIF funding onto the register being managed below this committee, but is there a sort of these risks and manifestations of the concerns that we have around the sustainable funding model, or is it not that linked?
Well, no, I think there is an element of that. I think coming in fresh to the business. So let me take a step back. In my previous role, we wouldn't even discuss going into a project mode until we had a sustainable funding model, we had resource lined up, and we had a business case that was signed off. Then we'll go into project mode. It tends to be slightly more reactive in the NHS, where we delve straight into project. This has to be delivered. We've agreed an end date already, but we haven't quite got the sustainable funding in place. We certainly haven't got the resourcing in place. It is a risk. If you ask me whether it's a major risk, possibly not, but it is a real risk. We're working in more agile ways. We're working in a more professional way to be more flexible, and so we're not always asking for resource and money. We know we're doing better work with our commercial suppliers so that we can move out on work packages and be more flexible in that. So I think that's going to be the answer to some of it, is being more flexible in how we bring external resource in, we use them, we release them, so that you keep your core staff to do that operational BAU. But I think we might reach a limit if that sustainable funding, we don't have some assurance around it from Welsh Government. This is something that may not go away in the future. And I say we're not, waving red flags at the moment, but I think there's a real risk if we don't keep an eye on this in committees such as this, that this could really come to a head.
Thank you, Gareth. David, you were going to add something?
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. That's a really clear update. I still quite haven't got my head around the specific resources you're looking for. Are we talking architects, program managers? What skills are we?
It's a mixture, David. So we'll use the data center 2 as we're there. Yeah. That could be people to lift, to shift, to carry boxes, to unpack. It could be those who are slightly more advanced in engineering that we trust them to rack, to cable. It's a variety. If we look on Myrian's side, we would want architects, engineers, designers. We can give companies bits of work. Could you design this? Could you do an impact statement on that for us? It's a whole range, depending on the size of the project, whether we hold it in-house or we try and get resource in. The vaccine service is a good example where elements of that, we've taken modules out and we've got external resource to help us do key bits of that. So it's an absolute mixture from logistics right the way through to engineering design.
Okay, thanks, Gareth. That's helpful.
Carwyn?
Yeah. Yes, I'm off mute. Excellent. Right.
I noticed that.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I logged this risk back in April, and at the time it was focused around sort of data center particular areas, data center teams in particular. You know what I mean? As in, that's why the examples, if you looked in the corporate risk register, that they given there are, the data center 2 project, the migration of stuff from legacy platforms. But like Gareth says, it does impact everywhere. It's just that for me in particular, I've got a cross pressure on the budgets in the data center area in particular, which makes it more difficult to be able to recruit unit domainers in. We've got a number of positions that don't have sustainable funding in there, which has been a historical thing when DPIF money has dried up, after the project phases has ended. But it is, like Anna says, there are wider implications. We can't move a data center just using infrastructure people. We have to fail over all of our services to run at the alternative data center, which isn't a task that's done by infrastructure people. It's a task that's done by those teams that operate those services. They rely on the infrastructure people, of course. But yeah, so that's where it came from. You know what I mean? As in, but it is a wider, like Anna said, it is a wider problem.
So thank you, Carwyn. I absolutely understand the point. That's been a really good discussion. We have run over a little bit, but thank you for your openness. And I know you all, want to, get to the target level rather than the current level. All I will say is a statement of the obvious. Really, is one, it becomes ever more important that we have absolutely nailed down robust BAU as the Welsh NHS becomes increasingly digitally transformed, and we've seen what an impact that makes on the quality of care that we're able to deliver. And Rydian, you've brought Welsh nursing care record, which is a bit of a standout for me, to the board. So I think this sort of slightly pervasive risk, right? It's not hidden, but it does need to be brought forward, Chris, in that analysis of risk coming on and off the board. And I would like to task you with going away and doing that analysis and having some conversations with colleagues and bringing that back. Thank you very much. we're gonna break late for a comfort break, so I'm going to ask that everyone bears with me for an express comfort break and comes back at 2:20. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, for playing ball and coming back after an express comfort break. In which case, Rachel, I'm going to ask you to present an update on where we are with developing the research and innovation strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yep, I'm going to give a brief update in relation to progress against the emerging R&I strategy and some key activities that are linked to that. So we are continuing to progress the R&I strategy, and we're currently undergoing a phase of engagement with key stakeholders, both internal and external. And we're testing the R&I objectives that I previously presented to this group alongside the vision, and also trying to understand some of the emerging priorities of both our internal teams and some of the external stakeholders and their expectations in that regard. We've also got the R&I working group. Again, I've previously updated in terms of the makeup and the scope and remit of that group, but that group continues to oversee R&I our research and innovation activities, and to monitor and guide on some of those activities. One of the key pieces of work that the group's been fundamental in overseeing is the development of a register of research and innovation activities. And that documents title, description, DHCW lead for the work, along with any key partners that are associated with those projects and activities. The register also logs the start date, progress and completion date, and any key outcomes or benefits that's been achieved as part of those activities. We're also attempting to log any dependencies with key teams, for example, Darren's information governance team and commercial services partners as well. And wherever possible, we're trying to link that activity back to key IM&T milestones. And we monitor that activity in the register on a monthly basis at the R&I working group. I wanted to flag one particular high profile project that's recently been completed, which is the Ideate study. And that's essentially an exploration of the feasibility, looking at outcomes-based agreements in relation to breast cancer treatment. And the reason why I'm highlighting this study in particular is because it's been a large area of work and a key demonstration of working with some key partners and some really good findings actually in respect of that. And I've listed some of the, we've recently developed some abstracts and some publications that we're hoping to showcase at ISPO EU 2022, and we've also submitted recently to International Consortium of Health Outcome Measures at ICHOM, their annual conference in November as well. So hoping to showcase some of the learning in respect of that. And in addition, we're working with internal groups and networks within Wales to share some of the learning in that regard as well. We're continuing to do a lot of work on partnerships, and again, one of the key R&I objectives that were previously discussed in this committee. And as part of that, we've been undertaking a lot of activity to identify key partners and what the collective responsibilities and strengths are as part of those partnership agreements. And we're trying to formalise those effective partnership arrangements wherever possible. And I've noted the recent update of the Wales Institute for Digital Information Memorandum of Understanding that was recently completed to try and strengthen that arrangement going forward. And I've just asked if the committee would note some of the ongoing progress in relation to the developing R&I strategy, the key engagement work, and also the activities linked to that as well. And I'm happy to take any questions.
So thank you for that, Rachel. David, you've got a question, so I'll call on you first.
Thanks, Ron. I've got two questions actually. I'll do one at a time. Rachel, going forward, I'm anticipating that there will be more that we're doing in this space, and therefore we're going to require to increase the capacity within your team and the analytics group in NDR. Is part of the strategy identifying what additional resource and skills that are going to be needed? That's the first question.
So I can answer that because we've recently committed to formalising a function as part of DHCW to try and coordinate and manage a lot of this area of work more effectively. And with that, we've got some key dedicated posts, because capacity to deliver a lot of this ambition, it is challenging, and I know it feels like a bit of an add-on to a lot of people's current roles, although the approach that we're also trying to embed is making this as much as possible part of our business as usual activities. And I know a lot of it had a good discussion with Karen actually this morning in terms of some of the key emerging R&I priorities and how we can embed this within where work plans and make it some of our core work, so it doesn't feel like an add-on. But I think that's a really important point, David, and I think trying to build some capacity into DHCW to give this the dedicated attention that it needs will be important, as well as how we can equip staff and teams with the right skills and approaches to make it part of the business as usual that it does need to become. But yes, we have identified some specific resources and some requirements, and linked to that actually the register that I mentioned as part of my update, and where I said what we're trying to do is to understand key dependencies on other teams, because this isn't just about people that will deliver the research per se, but it's also identifying capacity needs on other teams such as information governance, commercial, finance teams, and where we can identify the requirements on other teams, we need to be collecting and monitoring that, and also being a little bit more savvy about how we can charge perhaps in that regard, and make sure that we are resourcing and equipping ourselves and understanding the capacity and capability requirements in order to commit to any of these projects going forward.
Great, thanks, Rachel. It's partly a flag to say that one of the things we'll be looking at when you do bring the plan forward is what additional resource do we need and how we're going to get that. So thanks for that. You've touched a little bit on my second question, which was around the coordination, the partnership. So An observation I have that was sort of enforced by Evan's observation of this space is there's an awful lot going on in the healthcare sector in terms of innovation. Welsh Government seem to have sponsored lots of different initiatives. My experience of having done this in different market segments is you end up with lots of pilots that look really good, but they never deliver the benefit because they never get productionized. And given DHCW's role in the NHS in Wales, it's highly likely that the route to productionising a lot of those innovations is through the infrastructure that we manage, because ultimately, if you're providing insight to a clinician at the point of patient interaction, it's usually one of the systems that we have that is the route to doing that. So have we, and I'm not too sure this actually sits with you, so it's just an open question to even Gareth and Rydian really. Has anyone given some thought to, we're setting up to do more of this stuff, which is great. We need to coordinate it because otherwise we won't get the benefit out. But ultimately, there's a pipeline of innovations that are going to come down to us, and we're going to have to take them, and to get the value that we've committed to around the NDR program, we are going to have to productionize them. So we're giving some thought to how that pipeline of innovation ultimately gets productionized, and we then get the benefits out of it at the end of it.
I'm happy to.
I'm smiling because David, I could do three days on that. Rachel and Evan, I suspect you've got something to add to David's point, and then maybe
I'll let Evan go because I was going to steal some of his thunder based on conversations we've recently had, but I'll let Evan go first because I probably am stealing his thunder and some of your words actually.
I don't know. So yes, you know, the answer, have we been giving thought to it? Yes, absolutely. But I guess it's public meeting, so I'm choosing my words carefully. Moving to DHCW from Welsh Government is a little bit, but like being allowed the keys to the sweet shop, right? Or the toy shop. There are so many things that need to be done and move forward very quickly across the whole spread of the strategy portfolio, that and teams are already very busy, as you know from discussions that we have at the main board meeting. So finding the capacity from the commercial team to develop options around commercial partnering is difficult because they've got a very, very full program of, if you like, traditional commercial procurement work, and that's true in all parts. So yes, a lot of thought, as well as the productionizing. We've got to give really careful consideration to the transacting. And in my experience from Welsh Government, that's often where things stumble. That you know, if the company, in its wisdom, were to make the product available for nothing, then we could productionize and adopt it. But they're not going to do that, are they? And so we have to find a way to be able to transact on a commercial basis, and that's often stumbles because it hasn't been brought out clearly from the beginning of the innovation work. And there's sort of and then you get into a position where it's difficult, and everything comes to a dead stop. So yeah, I think we're giving a lot of thought to it. We're working through various potential examples and trying to look for some examples where we feel that we might have willing partners to work in a slightly different way by bringing some of these new elements out more prominently sooner. Life Sciences Hub is a key partner for us in this. But as you say, David, I think that DHCW feels like the most natural front door for the NHS in Wales for what industry partners want, which is one point of entry into the whole system, because of what we do and because of most of these innovations will be in the digital data and technology space. But we've still got quite a lot of work to do through our strategic stakeholder engagement to make sure that everybody else is content with that approach. And to get there, we're going to have to set out, I guess, some sort of frameworks. And I hesitate to use the word rule book because we're using the word rule book in a different context. But we're going to have to set out, you know, some pretty clear parameters for how we would work in order to get the confidence of health boards and trusts to allow us to work on their behalf as a whole system. So lots of thinking, but we're not yet in a position where we've got product or materials, I don't think.
Okay, thanks, Evan. And what you've described is not a surprise. That was my impression. This is a difficult thing. But my experience is you really need to sorted that out well in advance, because you don't want to be doing it when you've got a load of things that are really potentially valuable, and then you're sort of wondering how you then get them from pilots into production. So at least we're thinking about it, which is a great first step. Supplementary question, if I may, though. So when we've done some thinking and we've got some idea about how this is going to work, where, as a committee member, would I expect to see that surface? Would it be as part of Rachel's plan? Probably too soon, but where else might it come to life?
I would say through close working between myself and Rydian and Rachel and the commercial team. So a lot of the work that we can do on research and innovation, as traditionally we've been looking at it, is about partnering with universities. It's about supporting a research environment, and you know, I think that the mode of working and the principles are widely accepted on that, and there's quite a lot that we can draw on actually from the UK level, the Goldacre Review, and a whole bunch of stuff around trusted research environments and digital trials and everything else, where we're not where we quite need to be. And it's not through want of effort. Life Sciences Hub was established 10 years ago. But where we're not where we want to be is on the more industrial partnering, I suppose, the industry partnering around applied products rather than discovery research. And we've still got more work to do there, but it can't be held separate from the research and innovation strategy. It has to be part of that. But I think it needs to bring in some different capabilities and skills, and we need to draw on the commercial team to be able to do that. So it would come jointly from us, but we're a relatively small organisation, and we are very joined up. Rachel and I were on a call together yesterday, for example. So it'll be coming through us together, I would say.
Okay, that's sorry. I'm sort of going on a little bit on this.
Can I jump in as well, David? So I think the challenge here is research and innovation as enabled by digital health information, and also the deployment of digital innovation, prototypes into product, and proving out third-party algorithms. They're almost three different blocks and require different engagement tools. So Ivan's just touched on trusted research environments. There's a £260 million investment going into the NHS in England at the moment, and an awful lot of industry engagement going on that side of the wall, because, on that side of the wall, I'd be wearing my different hat. So Chris, can we just make a note that I have disclosed that I am a co-founder and director in a company called Precision Life, which does analyse non-identifiable consented patient data sets to understand disease biology. So putting that aside, because I'm not talking about Precision Life at the moment, there are a lot of conversations going on about that and investments being made, and there is a competitiveness of the Welsh offer, and we have a wonderful population in Wales, and because we have the digital tools in place, we are well positioned for that if we can create an environment to support that kind of work. And the Ideate program is a real-world evidence-based program, is an example of that. The second piece that the digital health community needs is a way of proving that an innovation actually has clinical value. You can't get anything adopted unless you have clinicians on side, a point that Rydian's made many times. And even I'll challenge you. I think there are companies out there that would give you the software for nothing or the product for nothing in a health system the scale of Wales, if we could prove the healthcare value of what they've done. So I think that is something that isn't impossible. And then there's the third piece, which is prototype systems that need to be productionized and deployed, and there's a different capability around that. So I would share that, because I think, Rachel, it just says that this is quite a big piece of work, and we won't land it all at once. Ivan, sorry.
Yeah,
I will shut up now.
Well, no, you're the chair. You can talk as much as you like. There absolutely are companies out there who will do that, and we're talking to some companies who are explicit about being willing to work with us on an innovation track and to rule out any commercialization of that particular digital product that they co-developed with us. They tend to be in the startup, pre-revenue, equity fundraising type space, because that's the value that they get. It is. We've as a board, we've set a risk appetite for ourselves in this space on value and innovation, and I'm finding it quite uncomfortable to say this, because I'm always one for ploughing ahead, but it is easy to get this very wrong, and there are some examples, recent ones. In England, there was some news coverage this week of Sensign, how 7 English trusts took shares in Sensign, which has then been delisted, and they've lost all of that value because they were effectively trading data access for what they thought was going to be a bonanza payday sometime in the future.
Very familiar with that.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to comment on it in a public meeting, but it just shows how these things can unravel quite quickly. And even in the commercial space, Babylon have just reversed out of a deal that they had with some East Midlands trusts or somewhere in the Midlands, I think, trusts in England, because they didn't feel that it was commercially viable any longer. So it is difficult on all sides, and I'm not using that as an excuse to say, well, we shouldn't do it. We absolutely should do it, but we need to head into it with our eyes open and check the doors and the corners, as they say, as we do it. So we shouldn't rush too much, is all I'm saying.
No, I agree, and I think the other piece of this is exploring whether or not we can offset some of our early work with access to third-party grants, and I don't know what our status is as being able to apply for funding as an NHS organisation. But if we're going to enter into some collaborations in a small, controlled way, where we can get external funding to prosecute them, and then we can learn some of these skills in a lower risk way, I would be supportive of that. So Rachel, I would say thank you for the update. There's clearly lots to do, and yeah, I look forward to the next iteration. If we could perhaps explore both resourcing, whether or not we would qualify for grant funding. I'm sure Ivan would know the sort of UK national schemes, if nothing else, and I think the other one is a bit of a competitive intelligence piece over making sure that the activities that are funded over the other side of the border are not racing away in terms of capability, and we're then losing that competitive ground that we might have had. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for noting that. If I could now ask David Sheard to present the digital programme overview update. David.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. David Sheard, Assistant Director of Service Transformation. I was going to go through the dashboard of projects and programs and pick out a few where either the RAG status has changed or there's something significant going on. But we can and then pick up any questions at the end if that's okay. So on the first slide, so the first of 4 slides, the only change in RAG status there is with the NDR, the National Data Resource, and that's a positive move to green, which reflects the start of the procurement for the Google Cloud platform. I think we've already spoken about Data Center Project 2, haven't we? So in terms of cancer, we're getting closer and closer towards November. We're a little bit behind where we would want to be, in that we've accepted some changes, must do sort of changes to scope from Velindre, but where there's a really big effort going on from lots of teams on that one, still making progress. And then the last thing I was going to mention on this slide was about electronic test requesting. So there are a couple of things on there to do with histopathology forms and a phlebotomy module, both of which have been historically delayed, largely by COVID, and they're coming to fruition in the near future. So that's good to see. So moving on to the second slide. In terms of change of RAG status, the Welsh Nursing Care Record has been downgraded to amber. This was due to we had a milestone about the single instance for WNCR. At the moment, there's an instance per health board. So although the milestone has gone backwards, we do have an agreed approach now. It was just that the agreement to that approach has taken longer than we would have wanted. So although obviously we don't want to downgrade a project, I think it's overall relatively positive. Other things on here, DSPP, patient and the public, we're getting close to some of well, firstly the private beta of the NHS Wales app, and then the subsequent betas after that. And on Test, Trace, Protect, the focus now is really on getting ready for the autumn booster campaign. The third slide, the only red on the whole portfolio is against WEDS, the Welsh Emergency Department system. Two principal issues here. I'll start with DPIF, which is the secondary of the two issues really, but it's the easier one to explain. So there's still some uncertainty about DPIF and the funding of this project. However, as Ivan alluded to earlier in the meeting, I think we're fairly confident that that a level of funding that will keep the project going is available for us. The principal issue for us at the moment is that the WEDS solution was implemented just before Christmas into Neath Talbot MIU, and since then, although the system is still being used and in some ways is greatly appreciated by the users, there are some outstanding issues, long-running outstanding issues, which mean that Swansea Bay are not willing at the moment to move Morriston Emergency Department onto WEDS, and that's really a blocker, as you can imagine, because not only obviously Morriston is one of the biggest EDs in the country, and we need to get that live for its own sake, and there's lots of benefit. There would be lots of benefits there, but from the other health boards' perspective, none of them are going to move in a direction of WEDS until they're convinced that the system is in Morriston and is working. So we have a double problem there, if you like. Since we wrote this report, there have been escalations with the supplier, as you can imagine, and we're in a commercial negotiation and discussions with the supplier and with Swansea Bay. Elsewhere on this slide, I was just going to mention the community system.
David, can I just for people who are following the recording, just say an MIU is a minor injuries unit. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. So
okay.
Neath Talbot has the largest minor injuries unit.
Thank you.
In Wales, but it's open. I think it's something like 7 a.m. till 11 p.m. 7 days a week, and only accepts a certain categories of patients.
Whereas Morrison would be 24 hours and a full emergency, just so that people can perhaps think about the different environments we're talking about. Thank you.
Yeah, much more acute patients as well. Yeah. So Welsh Community Care Information System, we have a long-awaited go live due later this month in Aneurin Bevan with their mental health area. So that is still on, and that's really good, and is testament really to the stability that we've managed to achieve with that platform over the last few months. Then finally, going down to page 4, there are no changes to RAG status on page 4. but a couple of things to note. The Welsh Intensive Care Information System, it's actually getting quite close now. The first go live is January into the Grange in Aneurin Bevan. So we are moving to the very final development and test cycles in systems integration tests before it moves into UAT. RISP, which is the Radiology Informatics Solution procurement, we've just finished the first round of competitive dialogue as part of that procurement. WIAS, the Imaging Archive Service, we are moving towards a pilot to test the migration of data from locally hosted PACS systems into the cloud solution. And then finally, I was going to just mention on digital meds at the bottom there. This has now happened. We had the inaugural board for the shared medicines record. So digital meds portfolio has 4 main constituent parts at the moment, one of which is the shared meds record and the governance for that. And the board met for the first time in July.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for David? David Solway.
Thanks, Rowan. Thanks, David, for the update. Pleased to see that NDR has gone to green during the month and understand some of the issues we've got around WEDs. So thanks for the clarification of that. The question I had related to the covering document to the slides, and we talk in there about establishing a shared resource centre. Yeah. I just wondered if you could, or somebody could just expand a little bit on what we're trying to do there, just for the benefit of the committee.
Yeah, so we feel that the way that we manage programs and projects is quite disparate throughout our organisation. So within, I report into Ivan's area, and we also have things like the NDR and digital meds, the SPP community, etc., all reporting in there. But there are some things that everyone is trying to do. We're all trying to do the same things, but we're all doing them slightly differently. So we're going to try and combine some resources there and do things more consistently so that we have a more consistent way of reporting and monitoring and controlling the projects and programs.
Ivan, I did see you have your hand up. Do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, so it started as shared resources. I think we're exploring what the right title is. But as David said, we've got over 100 people in the project and program community across DHCW, but they work in different ways, which because of the situation they're in, because of the different governance that they have, because of historical accident sometimes. So we're looking at how we can make that more consistent and shift the community towards being a more structured profession and provide common resources, toolkits, templates, playbooks, how-tos, so that they're all speaking the same language, working in the same way, and we should be able to drive some efficiencies across that as well. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's a this year ambition to move towards that, and we're hoping to take an initial outline scope paper to our exec team next week.
Thanks for the clarification. That's really helpful, and I'd support what you're trying to do. That sounds an eminently sensible development in terms of growing our capacity to deliver.
And the benefit of an open architecture, being able to run these things with consistent components and toolkits. So excellent. Okay, thank you, David Sheard. And note the issue with the Welsh Emergency Department system, but I think we're not in a position yet to fully clarify what the solution is. But note that it's red, and red for good reason. Okay, thank you for that. Darren, can I ask you to come back and present the Your Privacy, Your Rights piece? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I won't go into a huge amount of detail because I know we've had sort of discussions at the top end of the meeting on this one. It is a bit of a layered. It is about a bit of a layered approach in terms of informing individuals about one of their rights and then the responsibilities of every organisation to keep information held about them safe. It's kind of part of our organisation's gathered responsibilities. Let's just say is to ensuring that we kind of help and assist those that are delivering NHS services to help promote the good work that we're already doing around the governance arrangements that we've got communally across NHS Wales as a collective set of organisations, I suppose. We've changed the narrative a bit. It was your information, your rights. We've kind of changed it to your privacy, your rights, because there's, without going into a huge amount of detail, there's a lot of confusion, I suppose, about property and intellectual property of your information as opposed to who actually owns NHS information, which I won't go into detail now because we haven't necessarily got the time. So we've changed the narrative a little bit, but as I said, it's a layered approach that has been made available to all of those organisations that deliver at the front line NHS care. It is available on our website, but it helps kind of that informing element that is really important within NHS in order to convey the confidence, obviously to try and promote the confidence, of what we're doing with patient related information or client related information. So it's a long overdue refresh, I suppose, of the narrative that we're trying to promote, and something that kind of is another part of the layer of what we discussed earlier, which is around the data promise in some respects. So it's kind of a layering down. I suppose we're going from both sides of that in order to just allow organisations to convey to convey what controls and mechanisms we've got. That's about it, I suppose, in terms of just giving the committee a little bit of a backstory on that.
So thank you, Darren, and really commend the your privacy versus your information. I bank online. The bank holds electronic information about it. It covers the cost of that. It's their information. We have an understanding that they won't be spreading information about my financial stuff. And I think in other sort of industries, everyone understands that, and that clarification and raising the profile on the thing that really everyone cares about is privacy and trust, and in terms of managing information about our health, which is private to all of us and really important. Any other comments? No, in which case I'm going to move on to closing matters. Chris, you've got your hand up.
Sorry, Rowan, it's just a point you made earlier, Darren, about accessing this information, because he has included a link within the paper to the material. So if anyone was wanting to access it, those papers are on our website.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
It makes us all look better. So thank you for that. And thank you, Darren, for the paper. That was very excellent. There were no urgent matters at the beginning of the business. Have any arisen? No. Okay. Any items for the chair's highlight of the report to the board? Chris, I'd like us to cover off the corporate risk discussion. I think that was particularly germane. Is there anything anyone else feels needs to be reflected to the board? I think that was that. I think everything else was assured and through everyone's reports. And thank you. I know David and I spend a lot of time reading them, and I recognise you all take a lot of time out to produce them. So thank you very much for that. And date of the next meeting is Thursday, the 3rd of November, 1 o'clock. And we've just about brought it back on time. So we'll have a 10-minute comfort break about now before the start of the private meeting at 3:10. Thank you, everyone.